what I want to do, guys, is typically I'll come and I'll have like an agenda to go through and stuff to kind of cover. But today I really want to kind of meet you where you're at and field any kind of questions you've got and do my best to serve you. So for me, the one thing that I think served me really well in this business is understanding that, for one, I'm in a position where I've got people that really care to help me. And that was the first thing, because you can have that, but if you're not aware of that, you'll never take the true value that that has to offer, right? And what I mean by that is this, like there was people when I joined the company that had already kind of gotten to a level that I wanted to get to, right? It's like if they're here and they're trying to get to here, they've crossed the path. And I'm like, dude, I want to cross the path too. And they're saying, hey, don't step here, step here. And like I always wanted to work from other people's hindsight if we were doing the same thing. Does that make sense? Is it Jay? Yeah. So like if I'm going to play basketball with Jay, because I'm 100% sure he could beat me, right? I'm trying to learn like what he's doing and asking him questions, figuring out if I'm trying to play the game at a high level. I would be ignorant not to get around him if he's killing it and not try to glean some things from him, or just be the person that says, you know, man, I'll figure it out myself. Let me just mess it up and figure it out myself. I'm still going to mess it up. I'm still going to have to figure it out myself. Admit it's still getting the information from him, but it's going to make it that much better if I can get some awareness on where I'm at and how to get there. If I can get some insight, if I can get some direction, it's a big deal. And so one thing I'd encourage you guys to realize is that everybody with Family First Life, we're here to serve. Like we want to help you. You can reach out to anybody and get help, and you should. Like Jay, you'll connect with somebody differently than Ada will. It's just, that's the way it is. You'll watch a podcast and somebody will say something like, man, that makes so much sense to me. Like the way they said it, how they said it, I really kind of absorbed the way they did that. And then somebody else will do something different for Chase. The reality is this, guys, reach out and ask questions. A lot of my day is spent with messages that come, whether that's through Facebook or Instagram, and somebody saying, hey, I got a quick question, can you answer it? And then I connect, sure, and I do my best to help them. And so realize this, that you're in an environment where when you've got questions and you get them asked, you're gonna be in a position to grow that much faster, right? One of my goals or non-negotiables that I had early on was I never wanted to be around somebody that could provide value to me in the areas of my life that mattered most, whether that was business, marital, spiritual, financial, physical, and not have the questions ready to ask them. Like I spent a week with Shawn Meaike and I was trying to wear him out with questions. Now I didn't just have tons of questions on top of my mind. I had some, but I had to go into that thinking about my business to take a step back and say, hey, what do I not know, if I did know, would make the biggest difference in my business? And everybody's at a different spot, right? Because if you're just getting going, you've not made phone calls yet, your questions are gonna look a lot different than somebody that's already had 1,000 appointments underneath their belt. But you should still have questions, right? And I love the saying that says the quality of your life is dependent on the quality of your questions. And so if you don't have questions, you're probably not thinking about something, right? And if you don't have questions, it's probably because wherever you're at, you're kind of just okay with it. Because if it's like, I'll give you an example. I got 5 kids. There's been a season where I'm like, we're doing something wrong, babe. Like, we got to get together. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't like this. It's just not good. And guess what season that is? That's the season we start reading books, asking questions. Does that make sense? Because it's like, this sucks. But the goal is to always be asking questions, even when you're not in the season, so you could always be growing and getting to this next level. The other thing I realized is this. Like, I spend quite a bit of time with Shawn Meaike, and what I'm always, I guess, reminded of is how the stuff he says doesn't make any sense. All the time. And I used to kind of battle that. In fact, there was a year where it was just like, he would say something and I'd be like, oh, I'm doing that, dude. Like in my mind, that's what I would think. He'd talk about like recruiters and things like that, and I would discount, like, man, I'm doing that. But when I started to grow, we had an explosive year. One of the biggest years was probably 2020 out of all the years. We've had great growth in all the years, but that was an explosive year. And I could say, when I look back and say, what's one of the things that I did better that year, and I think the team did really good, was just being very coachable. Like when he said something, I wouldn't say, I'm already doing that. I would sit back and say, well, how can I make that true for me? So if he said, you got to have more recruiters. If you have less or the same recruiters in 6 months as you do now, that's an issue. Instead of me discounting it, I said, well, I could hire more recruiters. And then how can I help my team get more recruiters? So I let that find depth and figure out where I can find value of what he was saying. And we had great growth. And so what I realized early on is that coachability equals freedom. So if I'm coachable and somebody says, do this or do that, or if I ask a question and Shawn tells me something, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. The reality is it shouldn't make sense. You want to know why? Because your thought process has you exactly where you're at. If you were accomplishing the goals that you got in 2022 already, then your thought process would already be there. You'd already be doing those things. And your life is always moving in the strongest direction of your strongest thoughts. So meaning that where I'm at right now, my thought process is significantly different than it was 2-3 years ago, and 4 years ago, and 5 years ago, and 6 years ago. And if it's not, that's where if you ever talk to somebody, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of them where they're like, you interview them, and I'm like, I've been licensed for 42 years, right? Chase, you ever interviewed somebody that had been licensed for like 42 years? I remember I was like 20, and I was interviewing people, and they'd be like, you're 22? Man, I got underwear older than you. And I'd be like, well, dude, why don't you get some new underwear? That's friggin' embarrassing, bro. That's disgusting, But they would say that, and I'm thinking, like, you've lived the same year 42 years in a row. Meaning that they had done it for 42 years, but I was smoking them. Like, they'd never made a 6-figure income. Like, dude, I was 21. I was already at $500,000. Like, what? Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're living the same year over and over and over again because you've got it figured out. Your thought process is not any different. And all you gotta do is ask a couple questions, have the conversation last a little longer, and you're like, I kind of see where they're at. Like they've not grown. Why? Because they're not being exposed to a different level of thought process. And when they are exposed, they're more defensive of it opposed to open to it, and then more receptive to just take action on that. So what I realize is that if I understand that to be true, that a thought process of somebody that's already gone the path that's already where I want to be, if I know that it's not going to be the same as mine, it shouldn't make sense. But the best thing I could do is just take action. Now, what happens is this. This is why I say it's freeing. If I don't have to think about what I'm thinking about and why it doesn't make sense and how maybe it was for somebody else and it's not applicable to me because of all these conditions, and once I have these conditions correct, then that'll make sense, because that's not the case. If I talk to Shawn, he gives me feedback. He's giving me feedback based off my situation, not, well, Paul, once these conditions are in line, then you should hire more staff. Then you should invest more in your business. Then you should reach out. Then you should invest more in leads. He knows the situation, right? So if I could just take massive action on it, then guess what? Then I don't have any of my thoughts tied to how that doesn't make sense or how my thought process is here. All my thoughts, energy, emotion, time is going to be spent in execution of the thing that's going to help me get to the next level. Does that make sense? Now, what does this look in its baby form? The baby form of it, and don't act like you didn't do this. I did it. But when you first get started and you just get your agent numbers, guess what every agent does? They say, hey, you can make some dials? You making some phone calls today? Guess what they say? I need to know more about product. Everybody. Did you do it? Did anybody do it? Yep. I did it. Like, it was like dial day, and I was like, whoa, I need to know what. I didn't even know we were barely selling life insurance. I just knew the guy said you're making good money. I'm like, I'm in. And that's the honest to God truth. Because I was like, I'm about to do anything, as long as it's legal and ethical, and I might swear on that because I got a baby coming. Like, let's go. But I didn't even know what carriers we represented. No kidding. So when he said, here's a batch of leads, I said, whoa, dude, what are we selling here? Now, in hindsight, I know now that thought process, as far as I need to know more about product, doesn't make any sense. But at the time, they made all the sense in the world. You understand what I'm saying? That happens throughout your entire career if you're growing. I mean, stuff that you're doing right now should not make sense. Now, if the things that you're doing make sense to your friends or people that are broke, not where you want to be, that's not a good thing. If you're like, well, I hear you, but like this person validates this makes sense, and this person validates this makes sense. Why don't you ask all the people that are where you want to be? If you want to be a 7-figure income earner, call the 7-figure income earners and see what their thought process is. What you're going to get is that their thought process is very much all in agreement and alignment. And then you got this other group that's not there, and their thought process is in agreement and alignment. That's the way it works. That's why they say, like, if you took all the income away from everybody and you gave it all equally dispersed, it wouldn't take very long at all for it to all go back in the same exact hands. Why? It's your thought process. The way you believe it, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about your business, what you believe about the families you're calling. It's your belief system. It's what you believe. And what you believe is going to show up in every area of your life. That's just the way it is, because your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. So what are you thinking about? And is it are you exposing yourself to different thought processes? Does that make sense? So when you come in, the thing is this, guys, there's a lot of top producers and managers and stuff that are coming in and out of here. Some of you guys that are in here, have conversations, right? But because you hit a certain level, don't stop asking questions and reaching out. Like, I know that the moment I stopped, I'll give you an example. I had who was it? Oh, it was Joe Bezos. He called me up to ask me a ton of different questions. He's like, I want to pick your brain. We were on the phone for 30 minutes. I promise you, I got more from him than he got from me. Because I was hitting him with a ton of questions. I remember hearing this story a while back, and it was really good. It talks about, who's the guy that owns Walmart? What's his name? Bill Walt or Sam Walt? Sam Walt? Does that sound right? Sounds right. Feels right. Well, if you guys don't know, then it is right, right? So yeah, Sam Walton or Sam Walt, Sam Walton?
Yeah, he's deceased now. But...
Okay, well, you seem confident, so we're gonna go with this. So Sam Walton, true story. It's in his book, right? He wrote a book, and I can't remember what the heck the name of the book is, but I went through and listened to the audio of it. But it said that there was this company from Brazil that was starting a retail store. So it was these two brothers. What they decided to do is send letters out to all different big retail stores to pick their brain. No different than what John Maxwell did. And I remember reading this early on. What he did when he started his first church, which was in San Diego, this is going back like decades. He sent letters to all the pastors that had big churches, because you couldn't send like emails. This is, he's 70 something now. He was in his 20s. So he sent these letters, and he said, hey, I'll buy lunch for you, and I'll pay you like $100 if I can fly out. He's like, I had no money. He said every bit of my money was going to go to these luncheons that I could learn from the people that already gone there. And so he said he went out and he had like sent out 80 letters, and like five got back to him. He said, I went and flew across country to these different states to meet these pastors, and I had lunch with them. He said, that's what built my church. He said that saved me so much pain and struggle and adversity that I didn't have to go through, because I was able to work from their hindsight. And he ended up building the largest, fastest growing church in America when he first launched his church down in San Diego. And so what these guys were doing was really, in essence, the same thing. So they send these letters out, and nobody got back to him, but Sam Walton got back to him. And so he flew him in to the States. They got here. He goes and picks him up in his old, like, beat up truck, right? This guy's a billionaire, right? Sam Walton. And they go back, and they're like, they don't even know if it's him or not. They're like, are you taking us to meet Sam Walton? And he's like, I am Sam Walton, because he doesn't look like they go to dinner. And what took place was, the whole time that they were supposed to be there to ask him questions, he was asking them questions. And when he was interviewed about it, they're like, why were you doing that? He's like, I already know what I know. I want to know what they know. And no, honest to God, if you read the story, this is a fact. Like 6-7 months later, right? These brothers get a call, and they say, there was this crazy guy crawling down the aisles, measuring the aisle width, and he got arrested, right? It was at in Brazil at the retail store. They go, and who's in prison is Sam Walton. He flew out there and was measuring the width of the aisles to see if they figure something out to be able to fit more merchandise in and be able to cut cost and have more product. You understand what I'm saying? And you're looking at the most successful, but that's how it works, right? You either have a big business or a big ego. You can't have both. He was like, I'm gonna go out and be humble. I'm still hungry to learn, to grow, to get better. And I'm gonna go learn from somebody that hadn't even, does that make sense? But always just figuring out what to know. And then also, when you're talking to certain people, figuring out what not to do. Does that make sense? What to do and what not to do, depending on what that looks like. So I hope that makes sense. I wanted to really, I guess, bring value to an understanding of how important questions have been for my career and how important they are in general. Even in a home, most top producers become better at serving families when they get better at asking questions. Because when you're asking questions, you're in control. So if I'm on the phones or in the home, I know that I'm called to be the professional, which means if you ask me a question, I'm gonna answer your question with a question. So if Chase says, how much does this cost? I say, Chase, great question. The purpose of my call is to see what you qualify for at the best price possible. Now I got a 6 or 7, which is better. I'm always in control. I remember early on, when it came to the, and I started to understand this, this question thing, and the guy that hired me said, hey, any question's good. Just don't let them keep hitting you with questions. You're gonna have no control. You'll never book an appointment. In fact, if you put together a tally and you mark every time you ask a question, every time the client asks a question, if the client has asked more questions, guaranteed you will not book that appointment. But every time you have more questions, odds are you book the appointment. Try it out. It's a fact. Because if you're asking questions, you're in control. And I remember getting that and getting killed with objections. And this is honest to God true story. The client's like, well, can't you just send it to me in the mail? And I said, Chase, great question. Hey, what color is your car? And the client responded like, it's black? Like that, like what the heck's the purposes? You know, they answer, they said it's black. I said, perfect. Listen, my job is just to get and then put me back on track. My job is to get the information out to you. I've got a 6 or 8. No lie, I booked the appointment. They were so confused. It's pattern interrupt. But whoever's asking the most questions. Last example I'll give you guys that shows the power of this, like if you play the question game one time with like, who in here's got kids? All right, you got to play the question game with the kids. It's hilarious, right? You can play with anybody. But the question game is you get 2 people. You can't answer the question. Whoever answers the question loses. So I have to ask any question. So I'm playing with Chase. I can say, hey, Chase, where'd you get your shirt? And he can say, hey, Paul, where'd you get your shirt? It's just a question, right? That's all you got to do. And you think like, oh, it'll last forever. It does not last forever.
You run out.
No, you don't run out of questions. You get emotional. Whoever's asking the better questions is going to get your mind off asking that question, and you lose. And I've seen this happen with adults. I used to play this, and then I'd get somebody crying, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Because like you start asking, if you know more about them, you could win. And so I had my daughter, I had Peyton and Parker. I used to play with them all the time. I haven't now that I said this in quite a while, but it's probably like 3 years ago. Peyton was probably like 10 or 11 at the time. Parker would have been like 5. And they're playing the question game. And Peyton's like 6 years older. You think she'd win, right? Well, Peyton had a fight with her best friend, Zeta, right? Honest God, true story. They just had this big fight. They hadn't seen each other in like a week. And so they're going through it, and usually it's general. So Parker's like, where'd you get, Peyton's asking the questions, and Parker's just copying her because she's 5'6". So whatever Peyton asks, she just asks. Peyton's like, Parker, what color are your shoes? Parker's like, what color are your shoes, Peyton? They're going back and forth. And then finally Parker says, Peyton, who's your best friend? And just like that, Peyton's a lot slower to answer the next questions. So then she says, now she's copying Parker because her mind's not thinking about the game, she's thinking about her question. So then she says, well, Parker, who's your best friend? And then Parker says, do you think Zeta's still your best friend, Peyton? And Peyton says, shut up, she is my best friend, Parker. And guess who lost? Yep. Peyton lost. So that's the way it works. The better your see, if you can ask good questions when you're meeting with clients and building the why, whatever they had going on in their mind, if it was like, maybe they had a pregame, like, hey, listen, when this dude Chase comes over, we know he's probably gonna be good. we're going to say we're going to think about it no matter what. I don't care what he says. Like, you don't think, clients sometimes do that. Like, we're going to think about this, okay? No matter what he says, we're going to think about it. But you start going through questions, and if you're good at asking questions, they're going to be they're going to forget all about what they're doing. They're going to be so locked in to what you're saying that everything else goes away. That's the same thing with Payne and Parker. Payne couldn't think about nothing. She knew she just had to ask another stupid question, but she couldn't help herself because the question that Parker asked was so emotional that it had her so locked in that she couldn't think of nothing else. So if your close ratio is struggling, my question to you is, how good are the quality of your questions? And what questions do you intentionally ask every time you're with a client that work and work well? Does that make sense? It's not that difficult, but it is something that you have to execute to get the right results. So with that said, guys, I want to do Q&A with you guys for a short period of time, but I wanted to set that up just so, like there's a couple good books that talk about this, and I can't think of them off the top of my head. If I think about it, I'll shoot it out in the text that I've read that talks about the power of questions. But it is essential when it comes to growing, developing, and also with controlling, leading, guiding, and directing the clients that you're sitting with and the clients when it comes to booking appointments. Typically, if you see an agent that's struggling or that just hates the phones, they're an agent that doesn't ask questions and they're being controlled while they're on the phones. And it sucks when you feel like you have no control. It doesn't feel good. But if you're one asking the questions, leading and guiding, it feels a lot better. And even when it comes in the house, it's a lot better to ask questions and lead the client through the questions, because when you're doing that, guess what the client comes to the conclusion of? That whatever answer that they've given, right, that you've led them to with the question, it's their thought. And that's the power of selling. The power of selling is a transfer of thoughts of ideas, and ideas where, like, Chase has got my thought as if it's his, and if he thinks it's his thought, he's gonna defend it, he's gonna be moved by it, he's gonna take action on it. But if Chase thinks it's my thought that I'm trying to push on him, that's where the sales pressure, and that person says, that person feels like a salesperson. Well, it's because I did a bad job in transferring the thought to Chase, and so therefore he thinks I'm trying to sell him on my thought, opposed to this is his thought and he loves it. You get what I'm saying? So that's why it's so much more powerful, though, when you're in the home, for me to say, hey, Chase, listen, what you need to do is get a plan that's going to cover just 12 months of mortgage payments, so that way if you die, your family has time to get through that. That's what you need to do. Now, that doesn't work very well, because guess what? I'm telling Chase what I think. But if I say, Chase, listen, man, most clients in your situation, because they don't have a bunch of kids around the house, right? They're not 32. There's different seasons of life, right? Either now 73 years old. What they kind of want to have in mind is just this peace that when they pass away, their family doesn't have to right away worry about, oh my God, what do I do? How do I pay for final expenses? How do I pay for the bills? They have time to mourn, grieve, and recover, and then figure out what the next best steps are. For you, Chase, do you feel like that's about the same for you? That if you passed away tomorrow, you don't need a bunch of protection, that you just want something to bridge the gap? Does that sound like something that would be important to you as well?
Yes, sir.
Well, he says, I'm asking a question, right? I'm asking a question. I could say, Chase, when you pass away, are you guys going to keep the house, or do you think you'd probably sell the house? I'd probably sell the house. Okay, gotcha. So if you're selling the house, would it be important to have some money to be able to fix the house up, enough mortgage payments made just until you were to sell the house? Well, yeah, that would be important. Chase, how much equity is in the house? I got $100,000 in equity in the house. So Chase, if you passed away and your spouse couldn't make the payments long enough, in 90 days that bank's knocking on the door, and that $100,000 in equity that you've paid month in, month out, that's really like in a bank, the bankers take that. How would that make you feel, man, if that took place? It's just questions. Does that make sense? So you lead with questions. People love to buy. They hate to be sold. People buy and feel like they bought when it's their thought. And if it's their thought, it's because you guided with questions where they think it's their thought based off the answers they gave to the questions that you provided. And we all know, you don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to. I don't say, Chase, why'd you fill this form back out? Why? That's a stupid question because I don't know his answer. And his answer might be stupid because guess what? Stupid questions typically warrant a stupid answer. So you might say, well, Paul, I was just filled it out just to get some information on it. That's a stupid answer, right? Because who the heck just sits at their house and says, I'm going to just see what information I can get on this form. In fact, I'm going to take a call, book an appointment, and invite somebody to my house where my kids sleep because of information. Stupid, right? But if you get that answer, now you're trying to work uphill because it was a question that warranted a dumb answer that's leading them to the wrong thought they should have, which is this isn't that important because I just want information. Opposed to me saying, Chase, listen, most clients I sit with, it's 1 of 3 reasons. And I go into depth about making sure if they die, the following expenses are covered. I go into depth about income replacement. I go into depth about making sure that there's a legacy left and there's something in place to kind of leave more. And which one of these would make the most sense, or all 3 or 2? What's most important for you when you fill this out? I know the answer to the question, and the answer to the question is giving him the thought that he needs to have to make the right decision and choice, which is this is important. You understand what I'm saying? So it's the power of that. All right, so with that said, let's go through some questions. What questions do you guys have? James?
We've had a couple of agents this week actually run into this scenario. Even Tanisha had it. I need to talk to my financial advisor, or they're saying I have a trust. I need to talk to my attorney. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're not moving with submit the application.
For life insurance?
Correct.
All right, so what I would say is so James, your financial advisor, do they help you with like your brokerage account, or what kind of role do they kind of play for you guys?
Yeah, they advise us on all of our finances.
Okay, perfect. So what I suggest is this, James, like you don't want to get ahead of yourself. Like if your financial advisor, it seems like the person that I'm going to describe right now is a person that's pretty busy, that's helping a lot of people and managing a lot of funds. You want to make sure that you go to them with the best situation and questions that doesn't waste their time. And the reality is right now, we don't even know if you've got protection or not. So what the financial advisor is going to want to look at, and I can just tell you from experience without a question, is they're going to want to look at a policy. They're not going to want to look at something abstract or hypothetical or something that you don't even have or you might not ever even get. So right now, it would be premature. What we want to do is this, and this is what every client does in your situation. Let's see if we can get you qualified, right? Once you get qualified and you bring that to a financial advisor, they can give you any feedback as far as is the policy exactly what was spoken about or whatever that might look like. But at the end of the day, they're going to want to see policy. Does that make sense, James?
Yes.
So that's how to handle it. Now, if you come back and say, well, we really just want to run this by him first, because you might get that, right? Like, and I've dealt with this. I mean, dude, 14 years, I've dealt with this tons of times where I got that. I started getting it less when I held myself with a lot of confidence, right? Then it was almost like they saw me as the financial advisor for them in this subject, right? And then again, sometimes a financial advisor is just the easiest way for them to say, I want to think about it, and it to be something that's actually like that they could point to, not just a hypothetical. Let me just think about it and get back to you. It's more of like I want to think about it because of this, and then that person's not there, so they know it's going to be difficult for me to get past that. So it's a really great package of I want to think about it, right? Or I'm not sure of the value of this, or I'm not sure if I can afford it. It's a smoke screen most of the time. Because most of the time, there's no financial advisor that's like, hey, by the way, like if I call my financial advisor and it was like, hey, should I buy life insurance? Right. He's gonna be like, well, what do you like? That would be weird. You know what I mean? Like he's dealing with my brokerage and he's not handling that stuff for me. I mean, I guess I could give him all my situation expenses and ask him how much I need, but that's not very common. So it's typically a smokescreen. Now, if they come back and say, no, but we still just want to run it by him, I'll say, James, let me ask you this. So the plan we're looking at right now, because I understand you just want to have some good guidance and feedback, man, which is, for one, admirable, which is probably why you guys are in a better position than most Americans, because they don't get feedback. Now, I do that why? Because sometimes the person, it's like an ego, like, I got a financial advisor, it's like a blue chip on their, which is embarrassing, but it's like, I want to throw up my mouth just even impersonating that client, but they're like, that's how they are sometimes, right? Like they're literally doing it just because they want to show off. Like they almost want to, like, I got a financial advisor. Them other people, they don't, So how I handle that is I make you feel great. Does that make sense? Like, listen, man, that's super admirable. I suggest you do that. Because you saying don't do it makes no sense. You're an idiot. Like, that's not going to work. You might think that, and I'm not saying your thought's wrong or right, because I'm not going to go there. But what I am saying is that you can't communicate that and be effective. It's like you either want to seek satisfaction or a solution. It would feel good to say that's embarrassing. Like, what kind of, is your financial advisor work like on Main Street off of D, or where are they at? So, but what you want to do is say you tee him up first. So James, man, that's admirable. Like I think you definitely should. In fact, man, that's probably why you guys, and I could say this really objectively because I sit with families all day long and see all their financials. Like, you guys are better off than most people I sit with. And you guys got to feel pretty good about that. And it's probably because you've made some choices like this, right? So I agree. Now, the thing is this, let me ask you this, James, because I know how important this is for your family. We're looking at $100,000 in protection. In 20 years, you get all your money back. It's like a forced savings. We know, looking at your situation now, if you passed away, Tanisha's not going to have enough to make the payments and pay the bills. We know that's what that looks like. James, when you go to your financial advisor, what do you think he's going to say? You think he's going to say yes or no?
He's going to say yes.
Yes? Okay. So given the fact that you know he's going to say yes, we got to first get this thing qualified and make sure that there's a yes from them. So grab your driver's license. Even if they, regardless of what you ask him, he's going to say yes. So let's just go and get this qualified. Obviously, that makes sense. All right? Now, if you say, I think he's going to say no, I'm going to say, James, what do you think he's going to say no to? Like the amount of protection or like the affordability part of it? Now, all I'm doing is this. Like, when you say he thinks he's going to say no, dude, that's like you just telling me what you're going to say, and now I can uncover why you think it's a no, which is if you say it's probably affordability. That's just you telling me that's affordability for you. Because you understand what I'm saying? Like, he's not even here or there, and they can't decipher what he's going to think as far as affordability. So if you say it's affordability, I say, got it. That makes sense. Well, let's go and look at an option that he would think would make more sense based off your budget. I'll show you a lower plan. Now, James, based off this premium and protection, do you think your financial advisor, which is just you, would be more affordable? Oh, I think he would think that's affordable. Well, great. Let's see if we get you qualified there. And dude, I'm telling you, I've sold a ton of them just like that. And you're like, oh my God, what am I in Bizarro world? You know what I mean? Like, all the time. And I do the same thing if they say, if it's a single person, right, and they say, I want to talk to my mom about it, right? Or more times it's not that, it's the, it could be like an elderly client for filing expense or whatever, and they want to talk to their kids about it, right? And their kids are not there. I do the same thing. What do you think your kids would say when you were going to buy them, right? If they say, well, they say yes. Okay, well, great. Well, if you know they're going to say yes anyways. Now, the other thing I could say, and this is usually what I'll say before I say, what do you think they'd say no to? And I skipped it. Is when they say, I think they would say no. And the thing I say before, what do you think they'd say no to? I say, well, James, if they did say no, would this still be something that you would get because it's that important to you? And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, it would be. Okay, well, great. Well,
that's a great question.
If they're going to, if you're going to get it anyways, even if they do say no, you just want to be considerate and let them know what you're doing. I understand 100%. Obviously, regardless of what they say, yes or no, you want this protection in place. Let's see if we can even get you qualified, grab your driver's license. And I've helped a ton, because now that question has got them in this position where, what do you say? If they say no, is this important enough to you where you're still going to get it? Because a lot of clients, James, say, listen, I just want them to know, but it's my decision. I've lived with dignity my whole life. I'm going to die with dignity, regardless of what they want me to do or not to do, because most kids are like, I don't want my parents to think about it. I'm not leaving no burden. I'm going to make sure they're taken care of. Do you feel the same way if they say no, or are you just not going to get it if they say no? No, I feel the same way. Okay, great, and you move on. Does that make sense? So that's kind of, and then if they say, well, I don't know, I probably wouldn't get it if they say no. Then I'll go to, what do you think they'd be saying no to? Because then I'm really addressing you. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, guys. What other question you have? Well, James?
How did you stay so consistent? How did you stay so?
That's a great question, man. I think the big thing is like, you got to have like high standards and non-negotiables for yourself that are not dependent on any kind of outcome. And so I think it first starts with like having a very clear understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. See, most people know what they want, but they don't know like why they really want it, and they don't know how to necessarily get it. Like most people in here would say, I want to be a top producer. I want to have a big business. I want to have staff structure. I want to be an integrity partner. I want to, you would have those things. Like, I know what I want, but if you don't know like why you really want it, it's difficult, man. It's no different than like if an agent gets started and they're struggling with $1,000 to come up with leads, right? And they're convinced that it's tough. But if I said, you know, listen, there's some experimental treatment, your son or daughter's got a terminal condition and it's $1,000 and it'll save their life, do you think there'd be any issue with it? No, heck no. You know what I mean? Like, no question. So what's the difference? Well, it's the reason. It's the why. If all of a sudden something significant happens, and James, I said, dude, if you don't write $20K a month, man, like, you know, you're going to lose an arm. Like, dude, you're going to go figure it out if that's a fact, right? And so I think when you understand the reasons why you're doing it, it's a big deal. Like, understanding what your reasons are, because your reasons are going to lead to your standards. If it's like, I want to get after this. This is why I'm trying to be successful. I want to be able to help out here, give money here, live here, do this, donate this, whatever that might be for you. Well, then you come up with non-negotiables. Like for me, I just wanted financial freedom. In the most general sense, like I wanted to not have to ever stress or worry about money. And it was probably some dysfunction I grew up with because my parents would just fight nonstop about money, and I witnessed it. Like my mom would go to the fashion bug. You guys know about the fashion bug? You remember the fashion bug? All right. So my mom would come back home from the fashion bug with like 2 bags. It probably was like, you know, a total of like $24 in stuff, because fashion bug wasn't Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom's. It was a fashion bug, right? Like, and it was just like they would fight, and I was like, I just didn't want to have to ever worry financially. It was just something I thought about. When I saw this business, to me, it was like, dude, this is my ability to be financially free. Like I had no background, no education that could say I could ever get financial freedom, because that's not easy to attain. I mean, like 99% of Americans don't ever get financially free. But it was a big driving force for me. So it was easier for me to have higher standards. And what I mean by that is I'd have non-negotiables, James. So like, I would never not be at the office at 7 a.m. I promise you, I give you Steve Michael's number. He's with us. Kim Reber, she's not, but she'd take your phone call. All these people that would say when I was in the business getting started, dude, like I would be the first one at the office. When I had a team in Orange County, I'd go down there once every 4 weeks, and I'd dial it. The guy had an apartment, and in the apartment complex, they let him use this office, not office space, almost like a room where you could watch TV, like a community center maybe, within the car, whatever that would be called. But we'd go dial there, and I'd be there at 7 a.m. I'd leave my house at 5. Like I had these non-negotiables that it didn't matter what was taking place, I was going to live by. The ones that mattered a lot, like these standards, was I'm at the office at 7 a.m. and I'm making my first phone call by 7:30. I'd have everything on Sunday nights planned and prepared, so come Monday, I was going to be ready to go. I also made sure my environment was set where I'd create the right habits that would actually support what I said I wanted. For me, like if I was at my house, I didn't do very well, because like when I walk in my living room, my mind in that environment says, relax, sit on the couch. Like that's how your mind is. It connects to what you're used to in that environment. It's like what I love what Trace says. He's like, anybody ever been to church before? You guys anybody been to church? Has anybody been to a bar before? Has anybody had like a shot of like tequila or Jack Daniels or whiskey at the bar? Really? None of you guys? What's really going on here? Okay, like I could say yes to like bottles and stuff. Like, so with that, but have you ever been to church and had a shot of tequila and bourbon at church? You had a shot of tequila and bourbon at church? So, but that's typically, there's always one, right? And I'm just glad it's my audio and video guy that had happened to be the guy. But there's always one. But typically you don't. Like you go to church, right? And if you ever go to the bar, have you ever been to the bar and you're just on your hands and knees worshiping God with ear pods in? No, you don't do that. That's weird too, right? Casey's done that too, I guess. So, but does that make sense? Like your environment dictates what you do. And so I think for me, you know, James, like I wanted to like prepare. I knew that I had these habits, like it would be easy for me to do what I felt like doing. I didn't feel like dialing the phones. I didn't feel like waking up early. I didn't feel like doing those things. So I had to shift what I felt like doing, meaning that like if I could focus on financial freedom and that being my objective, right? And I could prepare the night before and say, okay, I'm just gonna get up tomorrow, and my goal is just to get in my car at 6:30. That's it, and then drive. So I would start setting in these little things that would help me make the steps that would put me in the right environments to eliminate distractions and set me up for doing the things that I wanted to do. And so the standards is a big deal. Like I would also never leave the office ever until I'd booked all my appointments or it was 9 o'clock at night. Dude, like if you ask my wife how many times I was home before 9 o'clock at night on dial days, it was like 0 because I would just be at the office. And I was the only one at the office most of the time, dialing until 9 o'clock at night. But it was just a non-negotiable for me. To me, that price was well worth the payoff of never having to stress about money, worth the payoff of being able to buy my mom a house and a car, to be able to tithe a 6-figure checks to the church, to be able to have my kids in private Christian school, and to be able to live where I wanted to live and be in the right community and do those things, man. Like to me, and travel where I wanted to travel and experience vacations and create memories with the family. And like it was well worth the price. And because if it's not worth the price, you don't pay it. But the reality is most people, the price is worth it, but you haven't identified your why and why you're doing this thing. So all you see is the price and the sacrifice, not what the payoff could be. So non-negotiables are essential, man. Another one was like if I'm in the field, I would never come back home until it was like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and then I'd be able to come back home. So if it was my run day, my last appointment was always at 8:30. My first one was at 8 a.m. My last one was always at 8:30. Now, you can say, what if you had a gap in between appointments? I'd door knock and I'd be setting up calls to book for the next day. I would double book weaker appointments. Like it was something that was going to be productive. In my mind, the moment I stepped in my car, most of the time I drive to Bakersfield, like if I'm away from my family, I'm working. So I want to collapse time frames, try to get as much done in that amount of time as possible to maximize my result that I wanted and get me closer to where I wanted to get. And so if I had a no-show at 7 and a reschedule at 8 and I was free at 6:30, I'd either pull over and dial from 6:30 to 8:30, and then I would drive back home. Or I'd door knock until 8:30, regardless of what took place, and drive back home. If my 8:29 door knock finally answered the door and I got in, well, I'd get in and I'd make the sale. Maybe I got out at 9:30. But that was just a non-negotiable. I promise you, dude, I did not get home when I went to Bakersfield for a decade before 11 o'clock at night ever, because it was just non-negotiable. And that's how I was able to run like 2.5 days for a long time and still become a Hall of Fame producer, because it was just super disciplined, intentional. So the other days I could focus on solely building, recruiting, and hiring while I still hit my numbers. But it was just standards and non-negotiables, right? And what I got my self-image from, I guess my self-esteem from, was executing in my non-negotiables, not the result. So if the result was really good, it didn't take me away from doing the non-negotiables because I did so much better, so let me coast next week. Or next week when I'm tempted to not go to the last appointment or tempted to leave a little earlier because, man, I only need 2 more and it's 7:45. It kept me doing what I needed to do, because my dopamine hit, so to speak, my good feeling was directly tied to me doing what I said I was going to do and executing my non-negotiable, not based off the outcome. Now, did I get discouraged if I got smoked in my strategy and how to hit my goals didn't show the result at the end of the week? Of course, I was frustrated. I'm competitive. I want to win, and it didn't feel good. But my self-esteem didn't suffer because I still executed on what I did, and I endured that bad week with a positive expectation that I was going to enjoy a much better week the next week, because I knew numbers don't lie. I can't beat them. They can't beat me. And so if I had a bad day today, I'm going to have a great day tomorrow. See, most people mess up their great day that's coming tomorrow because they had a bad day that was well below what it should have been, because they changed their attitude. They changed the way they think and feel. So the numbers, they screw up because they see and think and feel differently about the next day. So now when they sit with that client, what they say and how they say it, it's different. They're not with this expectation like, man, it's gonna be a great day. They're with this fear of like, oh my gosh, I can't have another bad day. And what if I have another bad day? And then I got this chargeback and this happens. And so they put on this lens, this filter that's derived from fear, and they mess up the phenomenal day that should be coming. I would go into the next day excited. And it's not easy to do because you just got smoked. And it's easy to have all this fear going on. But your mind, by default, is going to work from a fear filter. You have to be intentional to sit back and logically rationalize with your brain, like, oh, I'm due for a big setup. And to create this faithful filter to look at it in the right way, which really is a more realistic way, because numbers are numbers and it should work out in its favor. But it's not easy to do, but it should be. That's the difference, man. That's the crossroads between the ones that have breakthrough and make this thing work and the ones that don't. A lot of times, man, it's just the filter that they've got. One is faith-based, that it's going to work out, it's going to be a great comeback, numbers are numbers, and the other one is fear, like, what if it doesn't, and then what happens, and then what takes place, and I go back to school, and I got to go do this, and I got to work that dead-end job, and if that job never leads me to this, and then I can't, like, you got all these things going on, dude. Neither one of them happened, but you're called to live life with faith. And faith is confidence in what you hope for. Well, what do you hope for? I hope to be the top producer. I hope to be building a business. Well, if you hope for that, is your mindset, is your current thought lined up with what you hope for? And if it's not, then it's lined up with what you fear for and what you don't want, which is the absence of faith. And so non-negotiables are a big thing. The last thing I'd say to that, which is a great question, probably the most important question, man, because I think that, like, just being consistent, it just breeds like emotional stability, you know? And I think that's very essential in this business because those highs and lows can really kill you. Like you live, success is right here. You get right here, man, you could die. You get right here, you could die. Like if you start over celebrating things are going so good, man, that's where compromise takes place. And compromise is those small little things, right? It's like, man, I'm feeling good. I lost 7 pounds. Then you just also compromise, right? You throw in a little bag of hot Cheetos, right? But I'm not going to do the big bag because my kids got the little bag, and if I do a little bag, it's only like 172 calories, which I know because I just did this last night. But it's not a big deal. Well, it's not a big deal in the moment, but that compromise starts to cast these new votes on your mind that says, you ain't that disciplined, you ain't that structured, you don't want it that bad. And see, your identity is always going to lead you to the action and the habits that you create, always. If you've got an unhealthy identity, you're probably going to go out there and form pretty unwise and unhealthy habits. And so those little things start to shift. That's why compromise can kill you, right? Or if they go really bad, then you start to develop an unhealthy identity because of the result and saying, I'm not good enough. I knew this probably wouldn't work out. You see? And you start doing that kind of stuff to yourself. And then all that starts to lead to these actions that validate that identity, right? It's no different than why they say if somebody, if you're trying to stop smoking, and if I say, Chase, you want a cigarette? He's like, no, man, I'm trying to stop smoking. The odds of him stopping smoking, if he's been 5 days clean, is so low because he still identifies himself as a smoker. Opposed to saying, no, man, I'm not a smoker anymore. That changes everything because now he's saying, I'm not a smoker. And what do non-smokers do? They don't smoke. But if he says, nah, man, I'm trying to quit smoking, he's saying, I'm a smoker that's trying to quit smoking. And it's just the way it works. It's just that thought. It's what you say. So the routines and rituals is the last thing I'd say, James. Like, if you can put in place, like, good routines and systems, like I love what I think it's James Clear says, you don't rise to your goal, you fall to your systems. So what systems do you have? Like, and I love what Maxwell says. He says, your success is found in your daily routine. Like, show me your day and I'll show you what you're going to be in the next 1 to 2 years. Because it's those small things that compound over a long period of time. And it doesn't make difference right away. Like, we understand, like, we can't just eat one salad and think our life's changed, right? But if you eat one salad instead of the cheeseburger every day at lunch, Well, in 6 months, guys, like it's a difference. But what our mind tries to do, and I think it's the enemy trying to discount those small things, is make it seem like those small things don't mean anything. And those small things mean everything, because everything that's small over a period of time leads to something that's very big that you're living with. So if you can have these routines, like one of my best routines I ever had, James, was taking back my mind. And I did that in the morning. Like waking up early enough where I started to give myself an advantage. And dude, if you're waking up at 7, start waking up at 6:30. Just work on that. Like you're not gonna be the guy that wakes up at 4. Dude, I wake up at 4 now, but dude, I didn't used to do that. Like 2 years ago, it was 5. I've been working on this thing, bro. You know what I mean? But you just start to get a little better, just a little better, just a little better, just a little better, just a little better. And that little better over a long period of time, man, it leads to greatness, bro. It leads to significance. It leads to that person saying, man, dude, they're just so good. Like I think about this when I was in a meeting and Shawn had said, he said, man, Paul's a really good sales trainer. And he said that, and then what I thought about was like, people think that, like they'll say like, wow, he just became such a good sales trainer. And what I went back to was like all the years, dude, like all the days where I was driving back from Bakersfield and from 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night to midnight, I was listening to podcasts. All the days and the weeks that I never missed a training live, ever, never. And I got on and took notes. All the times where I drove 5 hours to Phoenix and sat there and took notes for a local sales training, which wasn't very local, apparently, 5-hour drive, but local as I could get. I just started thinking about that's what people see, but what they don't see is the dedication. It was just a system. It was a non-negotiable that I never miss a call live. I always take notes, and then every week I'm gonna find a call that served me it was health to me, right? It's almost like my body was lacking iron, or I don't even know what produces iron. Potassium. That's a banana, right? Yes. All right. So my body was lacking potassium, and I ate a banana. That banana tastes better. My body needs it more than if yours isn't lacking. Fair? There'd be things that throughout the week that my mind needed more than others. And Chase could be like this. No different. I say, who's the best speaker at conference? Somebody like Dave Anderson. Somebody will say it was Austin, Patrick. Everybody. They'll have different. Well, it's because of where you're at. They were the best for you based off where you're at. Like today, if I trained on just phone script, that might have been better than me talking about mindset, or it might have been better talking on phone. It depends on where you're at. Does that make sense? That's why we try to get such a wide range of trainers and topics, because we do want to best serve you. But what I would do is once I had listened to the one that served me the best in that given week, my non-negotiable was I had to listen to it at least 10 times that week. So while I was driving, I would just meditate on it. Does that make sense? Because you hear something one time, that's not meditation. Meditation is it's just a full focus, singular thought process on that thing. It's just, I'm meditating on it, man. I'm turning it over and over and over again. And so by the time that week had ended, what I needed, what I was lacking, man, I almost could my thought process was really shifting to that thought process that I really felt like I needed. And it could have been about any topic. Maybe I wasn't investing enough and I was kind of scared and timid. I was holding on. It could have been all kinds of things. I mean, everybody's got a process. It's like if I talk to any of you, no matter where you're at, I've been there as far as mindset and thought process. I mean, I was 19 when I got started and I was pumping septic tanks. And I had no family history of anybody that made any kind of income. So it wasn't like, it's developed, and everybody has the ability to develop. But he said that, I thought, man, it was all those days and weeks and just studying and recording myself and listening to it back, that it was those routines. So when he said that, people could think oh, he just was born with that, or that was just his gift. No, it was a product of a routine that was in place for a long time. You see what I'm saying? It was that routine. It was that non-negotiable that every week, man, I'm going to book X amount of appointments, and I'm gonna go sit with X amount of families, and if they don't show up, I'm gonna door knock. And dude, it was just routines, James, man. That's probably the biggest thing. I was never a top 10 producer in a month ever. which is kind of crazy to think of. Never. But every year that I was in the field, I was a top 10 producer every single year, but never in the top 10 for the month. And the difference was just consistency. Like I literally had developed these dopamine hits when I would hit my activity goals. I did not care about the result, bro. When I say that I did not care about what money I had in my bank account, I promise you I didn't. It could be $5 million or $5. I did not care. My good feeling was going to come from me executing on Monday what my routine was in place and executing it well. It was waking up when I said I was going to wake up. It was doing my prayer, my gratitude journal, my affirmations. It was me exercising. It was me it was me reading. It was me, if it was dialing day, it was hitting my dial goals. It was buying the same amount of leads every week, even if I didn't feel like it. It was a non-negotiable, so I didn't have to think about it. And see, routines become automatic eventually. And if they're automatic, dude, it's automatic. Like, do you ever think, like, when you drove to the office, you're like, man, what a drive. You know what I mean? Like, no, you don't. It's just, you don't even think about it. Dude, sometimes I get to this office, I don't even remember the drive at all. But that's normal because it's automatic. Like, when I wake up in the morning, I'm just going through, I don't even intentionally think about it. It's just like, I do what I do every morning. I wake up, I go downstairs, I do my triple shot espresso because that'll get you fired up. It's a top produced formula. I get that going with just some drops of stevia, right? So it doesn't mess up my fast. And then I go into my office, at my home office, and I put on worship music. I write down my gratitude journal. I think about it. I feel about it. I do this little breathing thing. I start praying. It's a regimen. I do my affirmations. I read the word. I send a note out of encouragement to somebody, just to say, hey, I appreciate you, or hey, you made a difference here. It's a routine. See, the difference between somebody that's killing it, it's not. It's their standards and it's their rituals. That's the difference. It's their standards. This is what I have to do. It's your non-negotiables, like what you're going to do no matter what, and it's the systems you have in place. And if you do that, it'll build consistency. If you don't, then dude, it's a. The last thing I'll say is this business. I heard they said it's either like the highest pain or the lowest pain, which is a lot of truth to that because it's up to you. Like, there's not a lid. Like you could be like, it's so great. Oh, it could also be so bad. It makes sense. Like, it's based on you. And what I realized too in this business, it's also the most like fulfilling and rewarding, or it could be the most depressing. And I think this topic is very much why that's true. If you're got your rituals and routines and you got your non-negotiables and you just do what you set out to do, nobody's perfect. I screwed up, dude, all the time. And I'm not just saying that I promise you. But when you're knocking it out each day, dude, it's very rewarding and fulfilling. But if you're not, man, it sucks, dude. When you're high and low and like you're doing it sometimes not doing it, and doing this and that, and sometimes you get leads, this many leads, and the next week you got a little bit less leads, and you're not sure about this, and then you change your environments, and now you're working at the house more, or whatever. Like that's going to kill your consistency. Dude, your mind is a powerful thing. My goal is to set myself up in such a way where I do that's the rituals and routines that'll lead to success. Because, dude, by nature, be clear, it'd be really easy for me just to kick it. I have no problem with that. Oh, I'd love to, dude. Sleep in, hang out, watch a movie in the morning with the kids. I could easily go do that. Does that make sense? But that's not going to lead to me showing the right characteristics, becoming the right person. It's not what God created me to be. He was like, dude, I created Paul. That dude's going to watch a movie a day. If you do it, no. Like, what are we talking about? And what you think isn't. A lot of times what we think is what we want is not what we want. You know what I'm saying? It's not. It's when we pay the price and we sacrifice, that's where we feel that fulfillment, right? That's where the passion's built. Because you can determine your passion based off your level of sacrifice. Oh, I'm passionate about serving clients. Oh, you're passionate about serving clients? You served 7 last month, King Kong. You ain't passionate about serving no clients because you didn't sacrifice nothing. If you're passionate about serving clients, your sacrifice would show that. Oh, I'm passionate about saving agents. No, you're not. It's about you. No. I'm passionate about saving agents. If you were, you'd save more agents. Like, you only know your level of passion based off your level of sacrifice. That's why if you look at like the Passion of Christ, the last 3 days of Jesus on earth is called the Passion. It's the sacrifice. So all these things put together, man, like, will allow you to be consistent and disciplined and form those habits. Anybody can do it. This isn't something you're born with. You know what I mean? Like, I'm telling you, I could easily go the other way, and I could still change. But my goal is to create these habits. And the last thing I'll say is this, that I thought was pretty powerful when I read this. It said successful people form the habits of doing the things that failures don't do. So they form the habits of doing the things. It doesn't say that they like to do these things, so they form the habits that the failures don't like to do. They both don't like to do them. But they form the habits, and then it becomes routine, and it becomes systematic, and it becomes automatic, and then it just doesn't matter. Like, I promise you, like, James, if you start waking up, if you're waking up at 6 and you start waking up at 5, it sucks for a while. It just does, because it's different, dude. But after a little period of time, dude, you will not tell the difference. And so guess what you did? You just created a more successful habit. And so you feel the same way as you did before after a period of time. But now you got a habit, a routine that's going to lead you to having more control over your day, more confidence, more dominion, and that's going to lead to a better day for you. Does that make sense? And that's the same with everything. So cool, guys. I hope that makes sense. I'll let you guys get back on the phones. Go crush it.